everyone, welcome to Guitar in the Real World. Today we have the second interview in the series. I got together across the internet with the great guitarist Ant Law. We are currently in the coronavirus situation, so we didn't meet up in person. Still got to try and make these videos and get people informed about life in general and life as a musician. Things are pretty challenging right now, so it's as good a time as any to have a chat about these things. The audio quality is a bit up and down because of the levels of Ant's voice against mine, but I'll do my best to edit it in a way that means that everything can be heard. Okay, hope you enjoy. Cheers.
So Tim, we find ourselves in, feels like for musicians, every day it becomes a more inhospitable climate.
It certainly does. I think we might have reached peak inhospitability.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Just that.
It's affecting you so much you can't even speak.
Yeah, that's basically what's happening to me. Yeah, I haven't quite had a nervous breakdown yet, but there's still time.
Yeah.
Okay, so welcome to Guitar in the Real World, Ant. It's good to have you here.
Yeah.
Even though we have to do this through the means of technology due to self-isolation. Now, viewers, hello viewers, who I'm being filmed on my phone over here, you see, may know Ant from your enormous recorded output as a jazz musician and your enormous presence on the jazz scene over the last 10 or 12 years. Isn't this so?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's enormous, but I've definitely been there.
Yeah.
You know, doing the jazzing.
Yeah.
So,
I think what's kind of important to sort of talk about really is that, you know, you have got this reputation in a certain scene for being somebody who does a certain kind of thing. You've got, you know, a number of really high quality recordings out there, and you've shared the stage with a lot of great jazz musicians. But of course, making a living purely from jazz is a bit of a challenge, isn't it?
Most certainly is, yeah. I mean, I would almost go so far as to say making a living from anything. You know, if you just pick one thing, can be difficult to make a living from. And of course, it depends on what kind of living you want to have. You know, like if you like sports cars, yeah, it's probably best to avoid jazz altogether.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't really like sports cars,
no,
or designer clothes or whatever.
Well, I guess that's the thing. That's one of the things that goes hand in hand with whether you pursue music as a vocation or any kind of a vocation, isn't it? Because you have to understand that it takes, in the eyes of some people, it would mean making certain kind of sacrifices. But for I think a lot of us, they aren't a sacrifice because we're just not interested. We just want to get out there, play music in whatever way that we choose to do it, and if we can survive somehow, weather the storm somehow whilst doing that, that's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That reminds me of one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given, but you're right in that it doesn't feel like much of a choice for us. Like, you know, for you, I'm sure it's the same. You never really chose it. It's like it chose you, and then it's for me. You know, it started off being like, right, how much is my rent this month? Okay, well, that's what I need to earn and stuff. And it's only now I'm kind of mid-30s. You know, I'm starting to think about what are the slightly more long-term things, like in another 30 years. Yeah. Where do I want to be at?
Well, this is something that Steve Vai has spoken about at length, isn't it? About when he started out, he would be like saving $50 a week just to sort of get himself ahead of the curve with regards to his financial security, and he's kind of maintained that sense of. It's not even a sense of business, although it is a sense of business, but it's also a sense of kind of responsibility and security, I would say.
Yeah, I remember I think it's in one of the Rick Beato videos, he talks about, you know, it doesn't matter how much money you're earning as a thing by itself. It matters, you know, how much are you spending, make sure you're earning enough to live within your means. But I just mentioned this piece of advice that I was talking about. It was a tenor sax player once said to me, I think my parents were saying, like, you know, have you got any advice for Ant? And she was like, yeah, my advice is don't do it. just don't do it.
Yeah.
You know, you're not gonna. It's too hard.
Yeah.
You're going to find it too hard, and you have to. You know, I say that's the best advice I was ever given, because you have to be able to listen to that and just go, yeah. As many people can tell me that, and I'm still going to do it.
I'm still going to do it.
You have to be crazy enough. And I remember Omar Hakim once saying in a drum clinic, a father was asking Omar about his son. I think this is a second-hand anecdote, but and he said, "What advice have you got for my son?" And Omar said, "Don't have a backup plan."
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, because, you know, when I was growing up and it was like, well, I think I want to be a musician. You know, my dad was very typically sort of working class boy made good, you know, nouveau middle class in the 70s, you know, that kind of vibe. And the whole idea of not having a backup plan, he was really supportive of me, but he was like, yeah, you've got to have a backup plan. And I never had that backup plan, to be honest with you. So I just figured I would just get on with it. I mean, this is the big challenge that any of us face. I mean, obviously, you know, I grew up with developing an interest in jazz, and thought maybe I would want to pursue that for a while, and I didn't, because essentially I didn't really believe I had what it took to do that as a focal point. But I believed I had what it took to be a professional musician in whatever guise that was. Now, I remember talking to you about being a professional musician in the past, and you said that when you were younger, you didn't even know that you could really make a living out of playing music. You just sort of did it and did your thing, and that was it. Tell me how you first started doing professional work.
Yeah.
In what kind of context?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to go to Edinburgh University, and then right towards the end, or rather when I finished the degree there, I suddenly thought, right, you know, I'm gonna, no more student loan, no more help with the rent from mum and dad or whatever, anything like that. I'm gonna have to pay the rent, and so I actually took some CVs. I printed out some CVs and was gonna take them into all the pubs around where I lived on Forest Road in Edinburgh. And but I bumped into a friend who I'd given a guitar lesson to in first year of uni, and she was saying, "Oh, I do this wedding band. It's like Ceilidh, which if anyone doesn't know what that is, that's like Scottish kind of line dancing country.
It's kind of barn dance stuff, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah, jigs and reels and that kind of stuff." And she said, "Yeah, and they're looking for a guitar player actually, and they pay £100 per gig." And I was just like, oh my God, that is unbelievable. £100 per gig.
Yeah.
And she was saying, how much do you get paid to do a jazz gig? And I was like, I don't know, like £15, maybe £20.
Yeah.
So, and then that was that. I sort of joined this Ceilidh and covers band, playing at the weekend, like a function band, you know, playing at weddings and parties and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But up until that point, I didn't know that was possible. Like you're saying, you know, my parents didn't say, oh, you know, you go to medical school and you become a doctor, or you study, qualify to be an architect, and then you do this. It was like that. I think all that people really know is that you can get in a band and then maybe you'll get big. Yeah, well, exactly.
You know? It's that thing of like, you know, you're either going to be in Led Zeppelin or you're going to be a failure.
That's it. Yeah, there's nothing in between. Yeah. But I feel like we are the in between at the moment.
We're the in betweeners, aren't we? Yeah, I mean, so you sort of had that initial experience as initial experience playing professionally up to a degree. You know, you're earning money from playing.
Sure.
How long were you doing those kind of gigs around Edinburgh?
About 2 years.
Right. Okay. And then at some point, did you feel that you were ready? You decided you want to move to London, or was it a sort of slightly more subtle thing?
Yeah, I think the main scene that's really happening up there, as far as I experienced it, was the trad scene, the folk music scene. There's so many incredible musicians playing that type of music. Yeah. And there's pretty good jazz scene there as well. But you know, in a place like London, which has kind of as many people as there are in Scotland, there's just more jazz musicians and more going on, more clubs, more music schools,
more competition as well.
More competition, exactly, which is it can be a good thing, if it doesn't overwhelm you,
pushes you,
it can force you to try and be better.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and then that was about 10 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, so you came to London and you were sort of getting involved in the jazz scene, I guess. Is that kind of what happened as soon as you could?
Yeah. Like I knew I wanted to play jazz. There were other things I wanted to do as well. I wanted to learn sitar and also learn the oud. Those kind of. I was really interested in playing more kind of world music. But yeah, I quickly realized that you couldn't do everything.
No,
like
sure.
you're saying, the competition is high. So I was like, right, what am I going to really focus on? And I find improvising really fulfilling. And I think I've always been. That's the thing I've been best at, is like sort of being a soloist, which is a big part of playing jazz and stuff. So so focused on that.
Okay, so you had to make a living. So with regards to sort of pro work when you came down here, what did you first find yourself doing?
So I sought out some of the same type of work. And of course, down here, there's a bit more opportunity for kind of Jewish weddings and Jewish function gigs and stuff like that, which are sort of infamous among musicians for being very lucrative. And
very long as well.
You are?
Very long as well.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah, you get paid like maybe 2.5 times as much, but you will work at least 2.5 times as much.
Exactly, yeah.
So I was doing that. The whole thing, which is how it came to us meeting. I was at a jam session where I was trying to kind of get to know local players and stuff, and I bumped into the drummer who was doing the Thriller Live tour.
Yeah.
And he was like, the old guitar player is moving on to another gig, and so they're going to need a guitar player, and I think you'd be good for it. Can I recommend you to the MD? And then I was like, sure. I had no idea what musical theatre was. Oh my gosh, I really had no idea at all what it would be like. And the main thing for me that is so surprising about musical theatre is just the degree of precision.
Yeah.
In terms of sound, in terms of rhythmic placement, in terms of like, do not be late ever. And in terms of like, if they tell you to wear like black clothes, stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
All those things. But so that's where that began, I guess, for me. And then that led to depping in the West End on that show. Yeah. Which then led to depping on the other chair in that band, which is guitar with a bit of keyboards.
Yeah. Back to my subject of doubling.
Yeah. But that's how I got to know you. So staying together.
The disciplines involved in playing in a show they're more rigorous than actually you'd often find if you're playing on a function. On a function, it can be quite, even though they want to put out a product that can be that's polished, you can get away with a lot of flexibility. Whereas playing in a show requires, as you say, a level of precision that you may not have even experienced before. I think. I mean, did you find that a bit of a shock?
Yeah, man. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I remember like I had to do like a video audition of playing one of the things, and MD was like, "You're kind of like pushing a little bit ahead of the click in this piece. Like, really re-record it and not do that, please." And I was like, at that point, I really couldn't really even hear. Sure. Placement. It just sounded like it was basically in time.
Yeah.
So, for example, but
yeah. Well, I mean, I think this kind of highlights really that in order to sort of survive in this business, you end up having to become aware of lots of facets of your playing that you maybe didn't even consider were going to be relevant. When people set out on this journey, I guess it all depends on what people's different backgrounds are. I mean, I sort of came into it from the point of view of being interested in the studio thing, and up to a point of the theatre thing as much. I've been aware of that way of doing, that way of making a living, and that kind of. I knew that kind of thing existed. I think in a way that you weren't so aware of, but ultimately you have to sometimes just dive in and see what's going to happen, and it's that kind of earn as you learn vibe, isn't it?
Absolutely, man. It's so rare that, no one's ever come up to me and said, "And you know all this stuff that you really like doing, that you're really good at? Come here and do that, and I'm going to pay you loads of money. It's never that. It's always, I saw you own a banjo, right?
Yeah.
Or like, you can just about follow a conductor and get away with it, right? Or like a combination of all these things. Or like, can you like play like really in time, but play like, play a bit of jazz with a bit of this, bit of that. It's always this, you've got to be versatile, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think, versatility is obviously the key, and we've all got our strengths and weaknesses. I mean, my background is much more from the sort of rhythm section point of view, actually. I can't, my self-confidence as a soloist is not so high. I mean, I can do that thing to a point, and in certain arenas I feel very confident doing it, and in other arenas I feel less confident doing it. Depends on lots of different things, but
that's kind of how I felt about like the rhythm guitar.
Yeah.
But through about 9 years of playing with you and obviously Damien Cooper in particular, and listening to you guys, I mean, there's only so long you can be around people who are good at something and it not rub off a little bit. I'm hoping that a little bit of it's rubbed off from you guys anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the things that you, all of you, this is the other thing that's really a great experience as a professional. If you find yourself playing alongside other players, you get to hear the way that people go about things, and I've definitely learned about things from all the other players on that show and other shows where I've played alongside players who are all great in their own way, and they've all got their strengths and they've all got their weaknesses, and I could pick a few guys out and I could say, he does that really well and he does that thing really well, and one of the good things about that experience is I think it makes you realise that nobody can do everything perfectly, and it makes it easier to accept that fact, but it also gives you that thing to look up to when you're trying to move your skill set forward. Do you know what I think?
Sure. Yeah, people used to say, "Oh, he can play anything, any style."
Yeah.
About some people, and I would just think,
really?
Wow,
Yeah.
Because there's one Paco de Lucia,
Yes.
There's one. I mean, I'm not going to go through all the different genres, but you cannot play everything.
No.
And if you can, you need to broaden your parameters a little bit.
Yeah.
But
so, in terms of like actually combining your artistic world and your professional world, how do you go about like prioritizing things? I mean, I think I kind of know the answer to this, but articulate that for me.
Yeah, sure. I guess it's always a bit of a challenge, like with anything in life, getting a balance, between light and shade. But I mean, I'm still trying to find a balance, and it has taken probably about 10 years of being in London to get to the point where my band is kind of up and running, with a certain amount of activity each year, in terms of gigs, and also like recorded albums and stuff like that, and a bit of sideman work, as well as maybe some income from teaching and paying it forward to the next generation, things you've learned, and then also the more kind of jobbing type gigs like Thriller, and for me the very infrequent library music session, or film and TV kind of thing. But I mean, as for the balance, I just try and say yes to everything, and just drink as much coffee as possible, and just kind of get through it. But I have found it really exhausting sometimes, and it's funny, this kind of enforced lockdown sort of thing that we're in now because of coronavirus. I'm actually really enjoying it because I'm just very relaxed at home. This week was going to be a total pain in the butt, man. A couple of early flights.
Okay. Because you were supposed to be playing overseas in the European gigs and stuff, didn't you?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's all one-nighters. It's not the comfort of like 2 nights in one venue. Or any of that. So,
on that subject, actually, how do you go when you're dealing with, when you've got a really busy week like that, and maybe you're travelling a lot? How do you sort of take care of yourself, and how do you sort of feel like you can still perform to the best of your abilities when you're frankly utterly knackered and
Yeah.
just beat, man. You know.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, like having a long lead time for anything that you're doing. So it doesn't matter whether I let's say I've got like a tour with my band in like a month's time.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I would probably have been practicing the music a month before. I would have it all memorized.
Yeah.
All memorized.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it depends on how complex it is, of course.
Mm.
There's one project that I've tried to memorize the music, but I can't yet. So that helps, you know, make as much of it so that you can be switched off and be exhausted and still do it. You know, it takes a while, but I guess, you know, you stick with it, and by the, you know, so we're working on like fourth album is going to come out soon, but live we still like to explore some of the ones from the first album, some of the pieces. Yeah. So like I really know them well now, you know, and they were really hard to do the first time we did some gigs in the UK, but now we're many years down the line. So I think just like doing the prep, all the prep like way in advance, so that when you get there you can pretty much wake up thinking like play, and you know, you're asleep and you just go, oh okay, yeah, which song, and you know you can kind of do it under those hard conditions.
This is kind of the way that I sort of treated general practice, you know, as not being a doctor, but you know, when I was younger and able to practice a lot more, a lot of it really for me was, can I get the job done effectively even if I'm really not having a good day? You know, whether that's like mentally not together, or I'm really tired, or I'm physically not well, or whatever. And if you've got that kind of foundation to build on, or that foundation that's going to support you, even if you're not really feeling on top of it, you can still operate. And I think that's how I've treated practice in general for quite a few years myself, because I mean I don't practice like I used to for a whole host of reasons, but you know, I know that if I've got stuff coming up now, I tend to practice in a much more goal focused manner these days.
It's more focused. It's like this and this.
You know, I can't just sit there and do, you know, 5 to 8 hours a day because I can't. You know, my body won't allow it, and my brain won't allow it, and my life and my family won't allow it. You know, but you know, I think that's the thing, isn't it? You need to be able to be kind of focused, have sharp bursts of focus, so you can get the thing.
Like I remember. Sticking some things in or parts in pieces that are really, really technically difficult. Like actually there's one piece now that we play that, like on the album I played it with a pick, and it gives a really nice marimba type sound. It's the tune Credits, but like live I can't really deliver that like well with the pick, because the pick's kind of darting around.
Sure.
So live I actually play that with fingers. So I think maybe it's actually being realistic and sort of bringing down the level of difficulty of things where you can. It might be like tempo-wise. It might be making a sort of slight sonic sacrifice, maybe by using thinner strings or something. I mean, I don't really ever do that, but I'm just trying to think of examples, you know, of things you can do to make things easier.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to that, you know, on the handful of jazz gigs of my own stuff that I've done. I've found myself in the heat of the battle. I mean, whenever I have done gigs, I've been nowhere near as prepared as you are for your stuff, because for you it's a much more ongoing thing, where for me I do little bits and I do it here and there. So I often find, you know, on a gig doing that kind of thing, I'm trying to play some awkward chord movement, and it's just like, man, I'm just going to drop the bottom voice out, because I just need it to be smooth and try and play it in time. And if that minor second isn't in the voicing tonight, nobody's going to hear the difference. But if it is one of those things that if I was doing it all the time, I would, by gig 3 or 4, I'd get all those details together. But if I do a gig and then I don't do another one for 18 months, and of course I'm never really going to get into that flow. So that's that kind of adapting what you can do at the time, just to get to the musical nub of the situation ultimately, and communicate your ideas as best you can.
Yeah, exactly. What's the most important thing? Like, for example, I can't. What's the size of your group right now?
Well, it's a quartet. So it's
Yeah.
guitar, bass, drums, and trumpet, and that's it.
Yeah, but if someone said, right, look, we've got this club and we want to fly you over and we want you to play your music, but there's only room for 3 people.
Yeah,
you'd adapt to that situation.
I would.
Wouldn't you? You'd
Yeah.
find a way.
yeah. I mean,
It's not
much.
ideal having to compromise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say my music is generally written with that ability in mind. You know, in as much as the kind of bare bones of the composition should work, and then everything else is colour and texture. That's and of course guitar is hard when you're in that environment, even if you've got a frontline player, isn't it? Because you know a piano player can do that sort of. They've got 2 hands and they can do all kinds of extra stuff, whereas we're trying to cover lots of space harmonically and texturally, and there's also the limitations of the guitar mean that if you're the only chordal instrument, the only harmony instrument, and you're trying to take all the melodic flack as well, it's a big responsibility, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, for me, guitar is an interesting one because it's not like a saxophone or trumpet where you can pretty much just play individual lines.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like a piano where you can play really, really harmonically. It's it's in between.
It's limited in both directions.
It's limited in both directions. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And we can, pianists can't articulate or bend notes as much as we can. I mean, you could compare it for days, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard making it work. Fulfilling what the music needs. Sometimes it will call for certain sound and certain harmonic stuff.
Yeah.
And other times it will call for more linear things. And yeah.
Well, I mean that's a challenge that will be ongoing for all of us for the rest of time, coronavirus or not. Okay, so I don't know how many people are aware of this, but you tune in fourths on your guitar, strictly from E flat up to E. And you're one of the. There's a few people who tune in fourths, but a lot of guys tune E to F, don't they?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, who else?
I've actually never met any of the other folks that. Oh,
Doesn't Tom? What does Tom Quayle tune? How does Tom Quayle tune?
I think he does C and F at the top.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And Stanley Jordan is C and F.
Yeah.
I think.
And I know Alex Hutchings is C and F at the top as well.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, the idea of tuning in fourths, I completely get the logic of it. But the idea, to even conceive of changing that for myself, for like, from what it would be a bit of a mind bender. At what point in your playing did you make that decision?
Yeah, it was around my 18th birthday, which was in the year 2000, and yeah, I was starting to learn jazz, and I had a lesson with Justin Sandercoe, and he said. You check out all these jazz tunes. They're all in flat keys, and learn these arpeggios and stuff. And I was starting to work out the shapes on the guitar, and I thought, wow, this is really a pain in the butt. Playing a D major 7 with a D shape down at the 2nd fret here, but then to get a D major 7 up in 5th position with that A shape, it's a different thing. And then it's like an E shape up at the 10th fret. And you thought, this is really annoying.
Yeah.
And I think I just thought I had the sense that what I was losing would be the big, jangly, really open string drone stuff. And I didn't mind, I felt instinctively for me that playing music that was more chromatic or whatever was going to be where I was going to go. But you don't need to do one or the other, I still will use an open tuning from time to time. But yeah, I guess fourths, if you've got like fourths being like a fully chromatic tuning over here for music that changes key every bar, like Giant Steps or something, and then you've got like an open tune, like open D, like a sitar or something, where you always pluck the root. And you've got all of the strings tuned to a key. That a sitar raga piece will stay in one key. I mean, most of the entire style of music is in D, So Yeah, so there's that. But so I changed, and then we have been joking about my experiences playing stuff like Sweet Home Alabama. We should do a demo maybe. at some point.
Well, it's like I mean, going back to our experiences on Thriller, some of those guitar parts are kind of quite iconic. Some of them are easy, doesn't matter what from a notes getting point of view. But just playing voicings like the Black or White riff. I mean, that must be a bit. I've never really thought about. Is that kind of more awkward in your tuning?
Yeah. So the real Achilles heel of Force is if you ever have that A-shaped thing and you want to hammer on that.
That's the one. Yeah.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
That is, you're just not going to do that.
No.
So yeah, Black or White has that. But for me, I've been playing it like.
Right.
So like.
Which again. Yeah. Which again looks like a fistful of notes. It's a different kind of challenge.
Yeah, exactly. It's impossible,
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's worked for you for quite a few years now, and we'll at the end of the day when I started on guitar in standard tuning, it was difficult for me to get my head around it. But of course, that's what I've been used to since 1987. So
that's it. Yeah, I wouldn't really recommend that anyone who's played a lot change tuning to Force. It can accelerate learning the notes on the neck. But someone like you who knows very well where all the notes are already, it's not really going to help.
No. I mean, I see the benefits of it if you're trying to learn improvising language, because you can just, it's totally symmetrical then, and you don't have to readjust your fingering. But well, that's
another situation which I remember what I was in, which is quite funny, and you think, oh God, have I done the wrong thing here?
Yeah,
was like depping on Jersey Boys.
Yeah,
for Nick Kendall, and there were 5 guitars that I had to play, and only one of them was in Fourth. So it was so confusing because you had to go up on stage and play all this stuff in standard because it would swap from 1 3 3 5 to another. One was in E, one was in E flat, and you really needed that big jangle open E. It was the open E kind of blues language, which you just can't get in Fourth. Yeah, and I don't think I ever made a tuning related error in that show.
Yeah,
I have done many times in my life, but that was not one of them. Yeah, so 4 guitars in an unfamiliar standard tuning, and then only the one guitar in Fourths.
Yeah,
that was very difficult.
Yeah. And the funny thing is about that show is that musically it's all 1 6 4 5. So on the face of it, it looks really easy. It's just like, and there's all the other stuff that went with that chair in particular, which anybody who witnessed it would understand that there's a lot of challenges besides just playing the notes, or there's all the backing vocals and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, having to adapt to those different tunings in that situation, must have been a bit of a mind bender.
Yeah, totally, man. You don't want to be doing it too hungover or something.
No. First and foremost, I think it's important to have your kind of your ideal goals there driving you, but you have to be ready to adapt to situations and circumstances, and if you want to pursue music as a career, and I think that's the thing, if you can pursue it as a career, you have to have a set of skills that you might not have expected. This is why I've done the whole thing about the features on doubling, because it was something that I was never considered it when I was younger. I just thought I just want to play guitar. I mean, I happened to be a bass player from a teenager as well, but that was because I'd always wanted to play bass as well. But I thought, well, these are the things I play. The idea of playing a mandolin and then playing it in proper tuning was just, I was well into my 30s before I had to do that, and even now I can't do it very well.
Let me ask you, man. So what's your experience been? So you've now released 2 records. Under your own name, and done a ton of gigs as well. How's that been to sort of to do that? How have you found that? Have you enjoyed it? I mean, I'm sure
it's been a challenge for different reasons. I mean, I didn't start making the first solo album although I did make one with some friends a few years ago. But this is the Outlook, the first one I did.
Yeah.
You know, I was already nearly 40 by the time I started making that, and I'd been professional for nearly 2 decades, just doing the different things. But I think the good thing about it was that I was no longer full of the anxieties about people judging my work that I used to have. And I'm just like, it was just like, man, I'm just going to do this thing because this is what I want to do. And I don't really care what people think of it. If they like it, then great. But if they don't like it, then so be it. But I thought, well, at the same time, I know people are going to respect the fact that I've done it, regardless of whether they dig it or not. They're going to respect the fact that I've actually bothered to do it, because it's quite an undertaking, as you yourself know.
Yeah. Man, may I interject for a second? One of the things that I think is so interesting about doing your own band is that, you know, I've heard you play like more like tech stuff in like Thriller. I've heard you play like loads of Pocket in that. I know you do loads of other things like that. But when we do an album that it says like, you know, Tim Rose or Outlaw, you sort of reduce this world basically of everything.
Yeah.
People will think, oh yeah, you know, he can do all this. It reduces it to one thing. And then people go, oh, that's his thing. And they might go, oh, I actually don't really like it. You know?
Yeah.
So it takes a real kind of humility
it does.
to actually
make
that leap, you know?
It's the fact that it basically, for want of, I mean, I'm going to use a real cliche, but you're kind of bearing your soul in a way that isn't obvious, because anybody who has any kind of background knowledge about or any understanding of music will listen to your work and hear your influences to some degree or other, and then they will know whether you've whether you've got a broad range of influences or whether your influences are very narrow. And when you're judging your own work, because you're so close to it, you don't really know how it sounds to the outside world. That's something that is really interesting, isn't it? Do you find that you don't know you can't appreciate how it sounds to the third party?
Yeah, exactly. Particularly if you are trying to do something which for you is new. If you're doing something which is very clearly related or derived from something else, like if I write in the great tradition of lots of jazz music, if I write like a new line on a bebop tune, you know, as Donna Lee was on Back Home in Indiana or whatever. Yeah. That, you know, Hot House is another one on What Is This Thing Called Love. There's the Coltrane one, which is called Fifth House. There's Subconscious Lee, the Lee Konitz line. There's countless ones. A lot of the bebop ones, like Go on, carry on. Yeah. If you're doing that, you can really gauge like kind of what it is and who's going to like it. But if you're trying to do something new, sometimes you have absolutely no idea at all. But you have to trust your instincts, I guess. And,
I think so.
Like you were saying, you get to that point where you think, I don't even care. I'm just going to do it anyway.
You just have to be yourself. And you know, I listen back to my stuff now, especially the stuff I did, 5 years ago, and I think, well, it sounds very derivative of there are some stylistic things that are so derivative. It sounds like sort of smooth jazz funk in places, and I think, well, it sounds a bit too smooth. But then, at the heart of it, there's still references to the jazz tradition. They just might not be so obvious. And when it comes to the way you play and the kind of voicing, the kind of like literally the voice on your instrument, the tone you use. I often say that I think I listen back to myself and think I sound like John Scofield on Valium. It's kind of, sleepy version of his tone and language. Even though he's only one of my influences, and I'm as influenced by Michael Brecker or Jaco Pastorius or Steve Gadd or musicians on other instruments. But so when it comes to doing your own music, I think for me now at my time of life, I'm just doing it for fun, effectively. And I've always enjoyed working as a professional. Sitting down and trying to play a show, or sitting down and trying to sight read a part, or sitting down and recording some backing tracks for a cruise ship at home, in my home studio, which is what I've been doing the last couple of days. And it's just like, it's all part of the mix, and it's all it all feeds into your musical personality. I think, and I think there are lots of great musicians over the years who found their personality by being that supportive chameleon. I think the perfect example of somebody who found his personality through doing freelance work was Marcus Miller.
I think,
Wow.
but by sort of suppressing his personality, it came out. Even, you listen to recordings he made when he was 20, any jazz funk records from back then, or pop records from back then. He was such a young guy, and he was just basically doing a job he'd been hired to do, but he still sounds like him even at that young age. And it's funny how, I guess if you're just trying to make a contribution to something, your personality will shine, whether you're trying to make it shine or not. It's just there.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
yeah. So my experience of my own music now is like, as we all know, trying to find gigs is it was a bit of a challenge as well, and it's not something that I spend a huge amount of time trying to do. Depends on what else is going on in my life, but I would.
It doesn't feel like there's a whole wealth of performance opportunities for creative music constantly.
No, there isn't.
Being thrown at us.
And I think that's the strange thing about if you're somebody who's been doing a different kind of thing like me for a number of years, you're not sort of known in the jazz world, which is, I'm putting the quotes up because I guess the creative improvising world, and people still can't help pigeonholing people. People are going to go, Ant Law, he's that jazz guy. What do you mean he deps on that show? People look at me and go, oh, Tim, he's that show guy. What do you mean he's got a jazz album? Or what do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean he can play pop? Well,
it's the way our minds work, isn't it? It's the way the human mind works. It's hard.
You've got 3 albums out. You've got a 4th one coming out. When's the 4th album coming out?
Yeah, 4th one is coming out on 10th of July. Although I did just get a text from the label before you called. So that might be up in the air now because of the virus. But I mean, I wouldn't have thought it would be. But anyway, look out for later this year.
And your stuff is available on all the usual platforms, isn't it?
Yeah. If people want to come and say hi, you'll find it. Antlaw. Yeah.
Antlaw. Whatever you are.
.co.uk.
Yeah.
I need to redo my website as well.
Well, this is I'm trying to put together a website specifically for this thing as an aside to my as aside to me being like a freelance player and all that. But gigs. We can't say about gigs at the moment because there aren't any. So we just need to keep people just need to keep checking back to your website if they want to see you play. I can highly recommend to anybody who hasn't heard your music to buy all your albums, because a lot of people, not only is Ant a great guitar player, he's also a very fine composer, and his music is deep, guys. His music is deep. I love it. So, but you've definitely got your own thing and your own sound there, and an old tone.
I was just thinking, what you were saying about Marcus Miller. Sorry, just to backtrack a bit. It's interesting. Sometimes you can try to suppress certain influences. Mm-hmm. Like I grew up playing with distortion, right?
Yeah.
But on my first couple of albums, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want
straight into the polytone.
Yeah, exactly. You want it to be really clearly. I was trying to say like I'm a jazz musician. I like playing jazz standards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you can't really hold your personality in for too long. So obviously the floodgates open now. I use distortion all the time. But hey. When I first moved to town, I had a lesson with Mitch Dalton because I'd read, I think my dad set aside an article from me.
Okay,
that was like being a session musician. Yeah. There was also one with John Paracelli, which was like, what was your advice for up and coming musicians? And he was like, it was like, what do you need to be a session musician? He was like, a strong digestive system, which I thought was quite funny for when you're touring.
Was that for Mitch? Was that for Mitch?
That was Paracelli.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
but Mitch came round. He was supposed to give me a lesson. And he didn't have a guitar, and I was like, you can use one of my guitars. He's like, I hope we're not here under false pretenses. I doubt I can teach you anything about guitar. My best advice to you is get in a band and write music and get out there. It's not the first time I've been given that advice either, but he was lamenting the closure of all these studios that would run back and forth between back in the day. And I mean, I whinge. I think whinging is a bit of a human thing to do, and definitely for musicians. But it does seem with the streaming and the bottom dropping out of the industry, as well as this whole thing, which is a positive about it, where it's very easy to reach loads of people, like loads more people, probably, thousands more people heard my last album because of streaming.
Yeah.
So that's not just hating on it, but you can observe that some of what's happening is good and some of what's happening is less good. So yeah, I think like maybe just to top it, to put a bow on this conversation, like it's kind of about just constantly adapting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You might have to learn a show, you might have to learn, like I just ordered this. I think it's an audio interface.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So now I need to learn how to record at home. I don't even know how to do that.
It's really easy.
Okay, good.
It's so easy.
I'll call you for help.
Yeah.
But, like you, we might have to learn other shows. You might have to learn a new instrument. You might have to learn a new set of repertoire. You might have to learn new tech stuff. You might have to get a new gadget. It's about adaptation, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's evolution. Even if you go outside of the world of trying to be a musician, things change and species evolve. Okay, it's a slow evolution. The business and tech evolution has been much quicker than the human mind can keep up with on a natural level. But it's very easy to try and cling on to the past, and we're all guilty of doing that sometimes. I mean, I've just read. I'm not a big book reader as a rule, but I've just read Coming Up for Air by George Orwell. And the thrust of that book is all about that kind of looking for the past and trying to cling on to the past and being scared of the future. And it was quite weird reading, closing it up, the last few pages of it last night, because it really felt like it was really kind of pertinent to how things are right now with the virus and the uncertainty. Because that book was written in the lead up to World War II, and it's clouded by the whole thought that there's going to be a war at some point. I mean, he actually wrote it before the war, but he knew there was a war coming. It's kind of quite a strange thing to read when you contextualise it like that. But there's so many human traits that have always been there, whether it's 2020 or 1938, 39. That we're kind of hardwired to be a certain way, and I think you've just got to kind of be self-aware and notice these things and kind of find a way of ploughing your furrow through it all. And be accepting when things don't always work out, and think, okay, well, it's going to be a different thing for me to what I expected. But how many people get exactly what they want out of life all the time?
Oh my God, no one. Absolutely, exactly zero people. And you got to learn from your failures. You learn a lot from messing up and from the close calls. You really learn from them. I think you learn from messing up more than you learn from succeeding, because when you mess up, someone maybe tells you that you messed up and it's really clear. Whereas when, if you're successful, whatever those parameters of success are that you define, there's no one to measure it for you.
No.
Except for yourself. And no one ever says, people do come and say, oh yeah, you're doing really well. And you're kind of like, am I? I mean, because you're not measuring yourself by other people's parameters.
No.
I think, you have to just set your own goals and work hard, don't you? And be prepared and to be patient. I've had to learn patience,
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I that's the advice when I've been asked for specific advice by young people coming up. It's not happened many times, but when I had a show, that kind of thing would come up a lot, and I remember
people love shows these days, man, don't they? The young cats, I remember I didn't even know what shows were.
Yeah, but it's because their perspective is different. That's all. But that word patience is the one that I've used a lot. It's that whole don't expect, because the people who are really that's their goal. It's like, brilliant, fine. If this is what you want to do, I'm not going to say anything negative about it, but be patient. And there was a young guy who was wanted to be an MD. That was his thing. He was only about 22, and he came and sat in when I was doing Greece. Just because he'd found my website or something. Anyway, so he came, and I wrote back to him and I said, do this, do that, find your way, do gigs, get to meet people, and his response was like, oh, thanks. Instead of saying, oh, thanks, I really take all that on board, he was like, yeah, but I'm not interested in that. I want to do that. I was like,
it's weird. It's one of the things that's so confusing about the music biz for me is that so much of it is done on relationships and personalities, and it's very difficult to achieve them. You know, you can apply to play at a jazz festival in Canada, but you can't really apply for like a gig, you know, or to depth for someone. You can't really. It's just so intangible. And
well, thanks for talking to me today, Ant. It's been great fun, actually.
Yeah, pleasure, man. I wanted to ask you a few more things. So, like we were talking about, I was asking you how you found it. You know, jumping between, you know, being a professional at a very high level in one thing, and then a creative artist doing exactly whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
So, what is that hard? Has that? I mean, I kind of know the answers, but for the people who are watching and listening,
it's hard, but it's rewarding when you, especially when you've made an album or two, because you've got that really tangible thing to look at, and you think, well, if I died tomorrow, I'd have left that behind. And it's not really an egocentric thing to do. I think it's a natural thing for the human race to want to leave some kind of an impression. You know, no matter what it might be, people have their own ways of you know, creative people. I think they're driven to leave an impression in some way, shape, or form. Anyway, and it's kind of what gets you out of bed in the morning. But I still, you know, I still love doing what I do professionally as much as I always did. And yeah, we were talking about moaning about it. We all moan because it's a challenge sometimes, especially when you're trying to, you know, tie that in with the rest of life, life is a challenge, as we're all finding at the moment. So
life is suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So
on that note,
yeah, man. Well, stay safe, and I will speak to you sometime, hopefully.
Yeah, nice one, man.